Welcome to the More Business, More Life podcast. Today I have Vitalia on the show, and we are going to talk about a lot of what founders, CEOs, and entrepreneurs have is one, the fear of starting your own business, two, how do we do it? And then you're going to hear Vitalia's story. She has this wild idea that she came to me and she said, I want to wear animal costumes while I'm doing business. How's that going to work? Well, it worked fabulous to the point where she's at capacity always and trying to continually grow capacity where she has clients. And she even says in the interview that you'll see today, she says, oh my gosh, if I walk outside, I get clients. If I just go outside, how would that be? But then the kicker of all of this, the most important thing is that she's doing it with her values. She's being herself and she's doing what matters in the planet and for people in her heart. And she gets to do all that while having a successful business. You might say, wow, you get everything you want. Yes, you can. And this episode is going to show that. So listen in and see how you can choose your life and have it. Kind of start with a highlight, because when we met, you so much wanted to play, because you're in your heart, you're a performer, but yet you're also a business owner and a leader, CEO, a founder of your business. And so when we met, it was like, is this possible? And maybe just share, we'll get into the details, but share how you thought that it wasn't possible, but then that you have it now. You're able to perform, even bring your art into the business. That would be so interesting for the audience to hear, because you're integrating play and fun and performance into serious business, and you've done that successfully. So maybe as like a highlight, and then we'll get into the weeds after that.
Sure. Yeah.
Kick it off strong, right?
Yeah.
Right in.
Yeah, I'll jump into my story. So, it started about 10 years ago when I realized that working in an office job was, not really how I was going to fulfill my potential. And, I went on a journey to align my strengths, my values, and my work. And I didn't really know how I was going to do that. So I just tried many things. And on that road, as you recall, we met taking neuro-linguistic programming classes at NLP Marin, which was, such a pivotal piece of my education. And at the time, I didn't think that I had what it takes because I didn't know what it took, but I figured I'm just going to give it a try. And so...
And give what a try? Just so everyone's clear, give your own business a try?
Yeah, give my own business a try, right? So at first I thought I would join the nonprofit sector and get a job, in another organization. But as I explored the landscape, I found myself feeling frustrated and thinking, actually, I think that I can do better. I think I can do better than working inside of an organization that may have a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of red tape, and, for me not to be able to implement the kinds of things I wanted to do.
Right.
So I set off on my own. And it took me a while to kind of find my niche. And when we, started working together, that was kind of the beginning of my niche. And at the time, I was very overworked because I did become successfully self-employed, but in a way that felt really not that good and not that different from the office work, except there was even less time off. And when I reached out to you, I was worried that I was on a road to failure, that the whole thing was going to fall apart. And that's partially because I'd never run a business before, so I didn't know what were the key things. I knew my technical craft, and I could offer that to people and, negotiate some contracts, but that was about it at the time. And so then I guess now, 10 years later, I have a small business that I've been running for quite some time, bringing joy and delight into the business practice. So I discovered my niche, which at the time I thought was absolutely ridiculous and impossible. I'm like, no one would want to pay for this. And you said otherwise. You said, actually, it was a great idea. And that idea was to bring animal costumes and business together, to do business in costume. So getting away from
the ears today.
Hence the ears. Yeah. So really getting away from business casual, which was super not fun. And there's so many challenges at work already. There's so many challenges in business already that, why not approach it with more joy and humor.
Right.
Yeah. And so I started experimenting, finding ways to make Zoom calls more fun, learning what kind of jokes can also teach my subject matter effectively. And also how to find clients that wanted this kind of experience, and that's where we did so much work together of how to find the right clients, how to attract the right clients. Now that's not a question anymore. It's more of a question of capacity of, how do I structure and organize my business to make room for all of the people that want these kinds of services. And that's actually really cool. That's cool and difficult in other ways.
Right. It's a whole nother level of learning,
Yeah.
but just so where you are going from being like the sole proprietor to actually being the founder and CEO of an organization that employs other people. So now you employ other people. And like you said, finding clients that want to merge, animals, costumes, fun, play with business is now, like you said, so much flow that you now are focused on how do we open up so we can have higher capacity, how we can have more. So just, I guess, come to that highlight of that beyond like, is this even possible? Now it's like, wow, it's super possible. It's happening. And now we're trying to figure out how to grow.
Yeah, how to do it more effectively, how to be more systematic about it. And then also how to let it continue to transform, because so much of it is a practice of creativity. And we can't just stay the same. It's not creative if we just do the same thing each time. So being able to, change with it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's so cool. So yeah, and that's right. Like, so it's like going to the movies and watching the same movie over and over. No one wants to do that. So in that, by you bringing these performances, if you will, or these costumes, and you once told me, you said, you thought this wasn't possible, but now like your clients show up to see what animal you are that day. Like they'll just want to come be on a call with you. What an amazing thing. Cause you think sometimes people, they're like, oh, I have to go do this business call. But then they're like so excited to see what the performance is going to be. What is Vitalia going to do today? So maybe before we jump into the timeline of events and like the thing, like, what does it feel like to know that you have this business and you're inspiring people where some parts of business would be boring? You're making it so much fun and even say delight that, people are motivated to do this. How does it feel to have this now?
Yeah. Well, it feels really good. I think one thing that's really important to me is mission, and the mission of the organizations that I serve, as well as my own mission. So I think a really big part of it, and what makes me feel really good about it, is knowing that we're directing our efforts to work that is life affirming, to respect each other and respect the environment. And that was a really big challenge I had when I was working in offices, is I often felt that sometimes the work was doing the opposite of
Right.
making the world a better place. And that was really tough.
That's hard.
And I had to leave because I wanted to be able to look at myself in the mirror and respect the person that I see. And so I feel really proud of, what has been accomplished. And I'm still, I feel like I'm still at the beginning stages. 10 years is long, but it's not as long as 20 years or 30 years. So I'm just really curious to see how it will transform going forward.
That's so
Yeah.
cool.
So I guess curiosity
Yeah.
is my experience. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's keeping you curious, which then comes into the creativity and like, and where you take it. So that's so beautiful. And I'm sure we'll come back to this, maybe like a full circle in this conversation. So bringing up that office work where you didn't even feel like, wow, not only am I not contributing in the world the way that I want, but maybe it's even going backwards. Maybe like what we're doing is not good. And so then you had to like stop. So maybe let's go there for a minute. I know it's not as fun part of the conversation, but I also adding into that you were also like physically harming yourself. So not only is the work not living up to your heart's desire, it's not working in your value set, but you, in this corporate environment, let's say, it's also this workaholicism that a lot of modern business has. So I think, and forgive me if I'm wrong, or just let me know, but I think that's happening, but then at the same time, you're actually like physically harming yourself because you're putting so many hours. Was that at the same time? Did I get that right? Or they're overlapping at all?
Yeah, I mean, it happened about that way, but so what happened was I was working at, a gigantic firm, and it had a culture of overwork, but it also didn't have a culture of wellness, and
Okay.
caring about each other. So, maybe in a different context, it wouldn't have led to those kinds of injuries, but I ended up having repetitive strain injuries in both of my arms from overwork. And for about 6 months, I had partial use of my arms. I was
And wait, partial use, what does that mean? Like, so you get
like,
numb on your hands or?
yeah, there's a lot of like, kind of unpleasant sensations. Things like, I go to close my hand. Will my hand close the way my brain says it should, or does it not? Right. So having trouble holding things, picking things up,
Wow.
pain. What was not good was I didn't feel comfortable taking time off. So I just kept working through it, which is, I think, why it took so long to heal.
Oh my gosh.
And my company at the time, uh, there was issues with my health plan somehow, and so I was having trouble getting the medical care that I needed. And because I was working, so I was Canadian working in a U.S. company, and just due to a technicality in their IT system, it excluded me from a whole bunch of company benefits.
Oh my gosh.
Which was really difficult. And if I called HR about it, they told me I wasn't an employee, which
What?
was incorrect because I had an employment agreement. But this was a lot, this was just kind of like falling through the cracks in a big system,
Wow.
while also being injured and working a lot. Because when they said you're not an employee, I was like, hey, yeah, no, I'm at work right now. I'm at work right now.
I
I'm
wouldn't be
pressing
having these injuries.
all the buttons. Yeah. And so the injury part was hard. And then I have something that I now call, or what happened from that is what I now call administrative trauma, right? That people can go through work experiences that can be so difficult that then it's hard to function normally after that. So after that experience, I left that company. I got a different job that was much more reasonable,
Okay.
and it gave me a chance for healing. However, it was in an industry that did not make me feel great about working in it. And when the Occupy protests started happening, it was very clear that it wasn't really the right place for me,
Okay.
especially, given the kinds of comments that I was, witnessing around the office, and in the leadership, of that company. So it was, I wanted to be in integrity.
Yeah.
And so there was the two pieces, right? There was the overwork and the injury on one hand. And then once that was handled, there was this friction in mission and contribution. And I found that even having a really great environment in a whole bunch of different ways was still not enough. That I really needed to follow my purpose more directly. Yeah.
And more business, more life. This is what one of the main themes for me is, that we live our heart center. We do. The saddest thing for me is watching someone work for money and then their heart's desire is the side gig, right? And then then what happens if that goes for a long period of time? We get tired because, in this modern time, like, a lot of people work so hard. Then when you go home on the weekends to do your side thing, there's no energy left. So for me, more business, more life is about what experience do we want? How do we design that into our life? And then how do we build our abundance around that? And so this is that opposite thinking, right? Like, well, we're going to go make money and then we're going to do that thing. And so what this transition where you're noticing it's not okay, it's not in alignment with you, and then you choosing to leave so that you could do those things simultaneously, like earn and do it. And I think even when we met, you were still questioning if it was even possible, right?
Yeah,
So maybe let's go to that, because there's other people listening to this right now. They might be having this situation. They might be in a place where they know their heart is not being filled and they're scared to leave. So how did you, like, what was going on? Let's go into the cocoon of that transition. Like, was it scary? Like, what was it like to say, okay, I'm going to do this thing?
Yeah. It was definitely scary. The thing that happened just before the transition was I wanted to do some kind of a personal project.
Okay.
And the project I chose was to fundraise and shave my head and donate my hair to children's cancer research. Sorry, to children's cancer patients who were needing wigs. That's where the hair went. And then the money went to children's cancer research. And while I was doing this fundraising, I realized that my job was really getting in the way of my fundraising. And I thought, wow, how do I really feel about my work if this is how I'm relating to it? Maybe it's not the right job for me, where I'm like really enjoying this awesome thing and, contributing and giving back. And, now I knew what that felt like. So I wanted more of that. And I would say that I quit my job somewhat accidentally. It wasn't very well thought out.
Okay.
But as soon as, my doubts about my employment were out of my mouth, it's like, the powers that be picked up on it. And suddenly I was in the CEO's office and they were offering me a different position. And there were all of these, different things started happening. But I knew that I could not stay at that company. So when I did quit, it was very scary and it felt like I was jumping off of a cliff.
Okay.
And I found out that when you jump off of a cliff, what happens? You're at the bottom of the cliff. And so then you're at the bottom of the cliff and you're like, now what do I do? And you start back up that cliff, and at the time I wasn't exactly sure what I was doing, but I knew I had to do something. So I would do this thing where I would show up for work, but I didn't have a job. I just had my desk and my computer at home. So I would go to work and I didn't have any clients. I had no work to do. I had nothing.
But you would show up at your desk.
But I would show up at my work and I thought, okay, I need something to do. So I'm going to open up my calendar. I'm going to put some things on my calendar. So I would put things on my calendar and then I would do those things on my calendar and hope that maybe there would come some work from that. And over time, actually, if you do that, the work will come. If you show up to your job that you're maybe even making up for yourself, the work will come.
Yeah, so you just had, and how, because you're creating activities, and then at the beginning, maybe there are activities that didn't work, but you're like, oh, that didn't work, so maybe tomorrow I should have a different activity. But it's kind of like trial and error. You're trying.
Yeah.
How long did that period go before we met? Do you remember?
I think we already knew each other when I started to do that, because I started to do the NLP classes first.
Oh, okay.
And that was still during my learning time where I was just looking for some education, and I was also doing volunteer work.
Got it.
And then,
because we were friends first, and then I don't know how long we knew each other, maybe a year and a half or something, or maybe 2 years.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah,
I don't remember.
It was a long time ago.
I know it was a long time ago.
So long
yeah,
now.
Vitalia and I have known each other a long time, and it's been beautiful. I'm so glad that you're in my life, and this. So somewhere in there, but I know it wasn't that long. So somewhere in that first year or two, that's when we then we really, then we were like, oh, here, I have some things I could show you, Vitalia, and we can make this easier. But so wherever period of time that was, you were doing these things, you had some activity, and then I guess if I skipped over something, you can add that in. But then there was kind of an acceleration of happening once we had some more tactics. Would that be true?
Yeah. Well, I would say that I was so through this process of pretending to have work,
yes,
I ended up gaining some work. But it wasn't necessarily work that felt good. It felt good at first, and then after a while, it actually felt really bad. And so, even though it was on mission, and it was within the industries I wanted to work in, it felt like the folks I was working with weren't really valuing my contributions, and some not so fun things were happening. It was very stressful. And so that's when I reached out to you, because you had a video online that I saw, and the kinds of things that you were describing, I was like, oh, that sounds like I could really use some advice in this area, because I'm not feeling that way, but I want this thing that Steve's describing. I gave you a call, and at the time it was, I thought it would be around how to manage my time and how to, somehow get better control of a workload that I was having trouble handling. Cause
right.
I didn't make the connection that because it wasn't fun and it didn't feel good, that was what was causing me to feel like the whole thing was going to fail. Right. When I look back in time, I'm like, well, I did a great job. And sure, maybe the, um, you know, ways that the client work was happening could have been better, but actually it was all right. But it was definitely a mindset issue on my part. And once I learned the concept of wow clients, which is, really choosing who you work with instead of just working with whoever randomly, that really started to make a difference. So then, especially like even being able to tell the difference between someone who starts off as a wow client and then becomes an ow client, which
Right.
we later talked about. So that first wow to ow client, you helped me, exit that relationship, which was such a key step to really having my own business. Because prior to that, even though I was self-employed, I was still, took on this contract in a small firm.
Yeah. It's kind of
That
like having no choice. I want you to continue, Vitalia, but I just want to interject like this wow client idea. Like, so just think about your job. It's like, oh, I get this job, I'm going to get this paycheck. You kind of have to do what they say, even when it's outside of your integrity. You hope that if you are in that position, you're in a company that has that level of integrity and you're in it. But let's say you didn't, like how you had, then we've had this dissonance. And then we get into our own business and we're trying to get clients. And so naturally, and I did the same thing, Vitalia, we're like, okay, you're going to give me money? Okay, yes. And it might feel good at the beginning, but then it starts to get sour. And like we say, wow or ow, you have like these wow experiences or the ow. And then it feels like the job again, because now it's like
exactly. Yeah.
outside of our control and we're just dealing with this client. And then if you have more than one client, it's like having more than one boss that you don't like. And it's not.
It's actually harder.
Yeah.
It's harder than having a job because, as you said, it's you maybe had one boss before, but now you have multiple bosses.
Yeah.
And before, when you're working inside of an organization, you have access to certain resources, and if you're working on your own, you don't have access to those resources, and that becomes very, very apparent really quickly. So it's actually is a much tougher road. But if you're doing something that you're really caring about and you're doing something for people that you care about, then that difficulty is worth it.
And that's where and come in. So then the wow changed all that for you then, right? So that, now because the idea, and I did it too. Like, we don't think we can choose our client to succeed. If we choose our clients, then we're going to have less because now we're being picky. But in fact, when you choose wow, you could actually grow your business. So maybe tell that part of the story. So once you decided, okay, what's Steve saying, doing wow clients? Okay, this will work. Like, what happened then?
Yeah.
What happened?
So the thing that I think is so funny about the story is what I really wanted to do is, my work in animal costume. And in fact, that's what I was doing already. But this was before Zoom, so people didn't know. And I didn't necessarily tell them.
So you would dress up in an animal
So
costume?
I would be wearing a little animal
working.
onesie at home, and I'm working, and I'm just like laughing to myself. I think it's so great, but I'm like, oh, if I tell people, what are they going to think?
Yeah.
They'll never take me seriously. I'll never get work again.
Yes.
And so for me, this idea of like working with a wow client would be working with someone who was aware and in fact delighted, maybe even celebrating having, more fun at work. While of course, still getting the job done. That's a requirement. And who cares what you're wearing while you're doing it? Like, really?
I think I think you said this. I'm taking your words. And I think you said it's 95% the business that we're doing and 5% the costume, but it's still the costume. It plays a big part in the fun. And then, because you are a performer in that way, you are an artist. And so you're bringing that artist to the real business at hand. And in fact, I think when you told me this, I'm like, it's brilliant because parts of business can be so boring and so technical. And then when you bring the fun to it, now we can like take a deep breath and laugh and then still get the work done. And so I do remember the day you came to me and you're like, this is what I really want to do. And you were like bringing it to me, like, tell me that I'm crazy, Steve. Tell me not to do it. Because I remember the shock on your face. I'm like, yes. Yes, Vitalia, do that. It's like, yes, let's bring animals to work and, animal costumes. And I don't know. So what was that like when I said yes? Was it total opposite of what you thought I was going to say?
I mean, I guess I didn't know what you were going to say. At the time, I was really convinced that it just wasn't possible, and it was a crazy idea. And uh yeah, you supported it, and I was very shocked by that. It was hard to even bring up with people. So I can't say that, oh, I went and I told a lot of people and that they had a negative reaction. No, I didn't tell anyone. That was the whole thing, is it was like the secret way of working. And, and I went through a process that was maybe a 2-year process of becoming more comfortable to let people know that this is how I work. And also, they don't get a choice in that, right? They can't be like, no, we don't want you to wear animal costumes, nor can people choose which animal I am.
Yeah.
But I do take requests.
Yeah, that's so brilliant, right? Yeah. And it's so fun. And that's why I laughed and said, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Because, as a marketer, so I went to film school, so I'm a creative like you. So I think in art. And I became a business person because I realized pretty quickly it's not show play, it's show business. So I had to learn the business of the play. It's the opposite. Like, so I started in play, and so that's why I could relate to you. So I guess in that way, there's no coincidences in life that here I come along and be your quote unquote business coach, because I'm also an artist that became a business person. I didn't start and go to business school. So I don't have an MBA, but I've taught MBAs. That's one of my things, and that's real. And that's not like from ego or anything. I actually was like in awe one time when a guy that managed $1 billion in marketing told me that I taught him something, and he had all these credits and, degrees beyond me. But because of the creativity and the willingness to do things different is who I am. So then when you told me that, I was like, duh. Like it wasn't even like, there's no moment. I remember, I can still picture you looking at me and saying this thing, and I could feel it. You're like, this is crazy. Tell me I'm crazy. Or whatever the feeling was coming from that. And then I remember in an instant, I was like, yes. Like immediately, like, yes, this is going to work. Yes, this is going to entertain people. Yes, this is going to want them to do the business that you do. And it's going to be a victory. And so that's why I was so confident with all that. And maybe you didn't even know, like, all in my mind. I know my background now, but like if you stack all that up, that's how that moment like triangulated. And it's like you had this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember your lack of hesitation and how certain you were, which really helped me have more confidence with it. And, over time, just this unfolding of my business, and, no longer being shrouded in secrecy.
Yeah.
I was surprised again and again. But now that I look back, I'm like, oh no, that makes perfect sense. I can absolutely see, why, joy and delight and humor is so good for not just business, but it's also very good for marketing. And that was one of the areas that I was not even really thinking about with respect to this practice. I thought, oh, if people know about this, they'll obviously think it's terrible.
Like they'll run away or something.
Yeah. But actually, the more that people know about it, the more excited and interested they become. Yeah. And so it became something where it was all word of mouth, largely. I haven't ever done any advertising.
Yeah.
Never advertised my services anywhere.
And numerous times now you've told me, you're like,
yeah,
Steve, what you taught me, I'm always full. Like, it's not a question of, am I going to have money? It's like, how do I handle all this? You've told me this year after year now that
I'm always at capacity. I'm actually over capacity, and that is its own challenge. But I never really have to worry about, is there going to be a client? And I think such a big part of that is it wasn't really just the wow clients and knowing who they are was a big part of it. I think for me, it was really powerful because I wasn't even being clear with people what my services were, right? So such a big part of it was clarifying what it is that I'm bringing to people and why I'm bringing it and who am I doing it for. And so the work that we did with the audio logo and just being able to have like a little 15 to 30 second snippet.
Yep.
Of how I describe my business, and then also being able to say, here's who my clients are. So it wasn't even so much that I'm going out and saying, hey, look at me, I'm here. I didn't do that. I just said, these are who my clients are.
Yeah.
These are who my clients are. And when people ask me what you do, what do you do? I would say my audio logo, and included in there are mission-based organizations and individuals who are making the world a better place.
Yeah.
And it turns out that there's a lot of people that are doing that. And I'm so excited to be one of them. I always like to say that I'm with the creators. I'm one of the creators, but I'm here to support creators in their creations. And so I'm getting tingles, but I wrote a poem that describes what I do, and it starts with, I am the builder of the house of dreams. And it talks about the dreaming process and the way that I facilitate that dreaming process, and it talks about the dreams that succeed and the dreams that don't succeed, because now I've been through a lot of ups and downs, with people's businesses, and it's tough. It's tough when the dreams don't succeed. But the cool thing is the creators and the dreamers keep going, and they have a new dream. And out of an old dream, there may be a new dream or 2 or 5, it's like this engine that keeps generating. And so to be a part of that is very meaningful to me.
It is, like I tell all my team, I tell all my clients, sometimes we get, and I did this too, we get so caught up in the how. It's just so much better to look at where you want to go, because there are always going to be detours. There's always going to be turns and that are going to take you places you never thought you would go, but you end up getting there. It's like right now we're on the West Coast of the United States. And if you and I wanted to go to the East Coast, there's probably like over 1 million different ways we can get there. I mean, even if you take modality, like planes, cars, trains, whatever you want, but then every turn by turn, and we could stop and see so many different things. And so I think that's what also catches up. I mean, this is a beyond business thing. This is a life thing. We find ourselves on a road that we weren't planning on being on, and then we throw a fit, so to speak, like whether that's a physical tantrum or just like an internal, like, but inside. And so what I found is kind of accepting those turns and then keeping our eye on the dream. So I love this idea of your poem that, it might not be the way that we looked at, but as long as our heart is on that end goal to make the world a better place, we're going to find ourselves there in a radical. And most people that I know that succeed, the way they got there is so different than what they thought at the beginning of the journey, but they got there because they just didn't stop. And so when you have a turn, and Jim Collins brings this up in the book, Built to Last, when you look at the companies that are like 100 years old, always often the way they got there is nowhere near what they have set out to do, but the mission remained the same. The core purpose remained the same. The way they got there had extreme flexibility. So then you look at it like something that's as solid as a rock. Why are we doing this? What's our core purpose? What's our mission? That cannot be budged. It's like a solid rock. But then the way we get there is like the most bendable rubber band, like we're going to allow that. So, and that's what I'm hearing you say, like, I mean, I didn't even hear the whole poem, but this is immediately what downloaded for me is that. And so I think even just this whole story, your life, because you're like, I have to, in your mind, we're thinking, I have to be this business woman and I have to do it in this way because this is the way other people do it. So it's completely ridiculous that I wear costumes. I'm going to hide that so no one knows, but this is how I have fun. This is how I have fun and I can stay sane. So in a real way, it's, and say my daughter just told me, she said, people that talk to themselves are less likely to go crazy. She saw some statistic on that or something, but the reason I bring that in now is like, in this world where business can be tough and all that, you're having fun. And then through this, you've now been able to open up to the world and expose that for yourself. And then the last part to me on this, and I'm just echoing what you're saying, then it becomes this throughput. When you're doing something right, and all my clients, when they're doing and living their purpose, the water just flows. And that's what's happening. You're getting rewarded because you're doing truth. So how does it feel now to be on the other side of like, is this even possible? Can I even have my own business? Can I make money? I'm like showing up at my desk and now to be the point where it just, you're always full, and now you're just figuring out, how can I help more people? How does it feel to be on the other side of this?
Yeah, I mean, it's both exhilarating and still scary,
Mhm.
because I am constantly learning new things.
Right.
So it's like I've gone through so much already, and there's still so much more. So I don't feel like I'm at the end of any kind of journey. I'm still kind of in the middle of the whole thing. And the thing that's really different is that I know that I'm making an impact. Before I was like, can I make an impact? And then now I know I can, and I know I have. And some of the things that I set out to do, I have done. And
Congratulations.
thank you. Now I have new ideas and new goals, and
The journey continues.
the journey continues. There's new projects, and I'm continuing to look at, like, what skills do I need for the road ahead,
Mm.
and cultivating those skills. So, um, I guess, there's no, it's not like I've arrived,
Yeah.
so I don't have this feeling of completion. And, I think that entrepreneurs, we're not satisfied, we want to do the next thing, and take the next step. So, um, there just really hasn't been very much stagnation.
Yeah,
Um,
you're always, and you're so creative, so you're always doing the next. You're like, "What can I do now? What can I do more? Yeah, what's the next step? How can I help more?" I
yeah, so
get it.
like the next thing, so there's the stuff with my business, and that's really awesome. But what I'm really looking at these days is expanding my love of circus and performance,
Yeah.
and seeing how that can be a platform for more joy and more connection. I think it's uh, a difficult time in the world for a lot of different people, and I want to do something about that.
Yeah.
And I think my regular line of work doesn't address that directly. But theater and performance and public engagement do. So I'm in the process of planning towards a social circus program. I'm not sure if that's the right word for it. I'm not exactly sure what
Yeah.
it's supposed to be called. But it will include, performers such as clowns, visiting maybe, like, medical facilities, things like that, doing performances in public, creating work, getting on stages. So it's not just about my performance. I'm a student
Yeah.
when it comes to performing. I still have a lot
But
of
which you take really
practice.
serious, like
I mean, I do,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
you're taking classes, you're learning from other clowns, mimes. Like, I mean, and your play is serious, and
I
that's
mean, it
good.
is, yeah, like,
Yes.
so just to give you an idea, the last 3 days, I've been in a 3-day workshop, and then I've got classes lined up every day this week, and then I'm off a weekend, and the weekend following, I have another 3-day workshop, and then I still need the details, but then I'll be a guest artist, at a youth summer camp for indigenous youth.
Wow.
Um, right now, that's the tentative plan. And then, somewhere in between, I need to find time to create a haunted tea party that another artist wants to do with me. We've been talking about it and practicing a little bit. So it's just a lot of creativity, and I get a chance to focus on it. And I already have this business that's happening, and I
Yeah.
have the work from that,
Yeah.
and so I can bring some of that creativity. I share some of the performance elements with my clients. They enjoy hearing about it, but I'm also doing the serious work, and I think it's really cool that I get to do this other work as well.
Yeah.
So even though you might say, okay, so she's got like a day job and an evening job, that's not what it
Yeah.
feels like.
Well, and
Yeah.
and you're gonna love this. It's not released yet, but I did a podcast with Alex Sujung Kim Pang, and he wrote a book called Rest, and he talks about geniuses. And there's a lot of research around this, that geniuses are more made than born. And the way that it is that they're as proactive in their rest as they are in their
Yeah.
work. And then he proves it, like Nobel Prize winners, like scientific scholars. And there's a study in there that you'll love this. And I echoed this. I've said this on like a couple of podcasts already, but it's so powerful. They did like a 30-year study, and they took MIT graduates, like high level, and there's like 40 of them, and they're all at their peak at the end of college. And then they followed them through their career for decades. And the ones that had a serious hobby, you would call it, where they're like climbing or they're performing or they're doing music or whatever, in that group, there were 3 Nobel Prizes, all these scholastic, huge monumental successes in the laboratory, and all these scientific discoveries. Some of them are authors. I mean, like, just goes on and on and on. And then that was half of the group. And it was weird. It was almost like they planned it, but they didn't. But like the other half of the group, they went and they only did work, and they were putting like 17 hours in the lab doing all this work, and for the cause too. Like, I'm changing the world, right? But as their career went on, they got more and more exhausted. They would like collapse on the couch. They're not present in their life. Some of them became abusers of substances, because they can't even fall asleep. So they're taking pills or they're drinking, and it was a complete decline of their careers. And some even lost a life and things. And so you look at it, it was created. All that success was created by doing what you're doing. So without you, I don't even know if I brought this up to you yet. I don't think I have. But I guess this is more for you and for everyone listening, that when you do what you're doing, you're actually acting in the genius. Because now, even though you're not in your business work, what they prove scientifically with all the brain scans now, that you're actually subconsciously working out your business stuff when you're playing. So then you'll show back up at work, because you have to be active as a performer and you have to give that whole performance. It actually activates your subconscious mind to figure out your business stuff in the background while you're focusing on others. And as one more example, like climbers, they say it's the best because it's like life or death. And so if you're not focused on where you're going to grab on next, then you might slip and die. Then you literally didn't give a crap about the lab, like, because they were talking about scientists in this study. So they could care what was in the beaker or any of that stuff. But when you go home and you sit on the couch and watch Netflix and you're thinking about your lab, you're actually causing your brain not to like put all the wires together and help solve the issue. So I guess I'm bringing this in a big way to you, Vitalia, because what you're doing, whether you knew it or not, you're actually acting in a mode of genius. You're having that duality on purpose. So you're as serious about the good work that you do in the business world, and you're as serious in the performing world. And that actually lights you up. And I've watched you. And that's why your success becomes greater and greater. It's like, basically, I'm telling you, there's actually science behind what you're doing. It's not just like, oh, look what we did. Like, we just guess, but you went with your heart. So I know you didn't look at all the scientific studies and choose like, I'm going to do this because science says. You just went by your heart, but it served you, and it's also backed up by science. So this is brilliant. So you are an example of someone that chooses to live. And so that's why I'm making this so big right now, Vitalia. You're choosing your life, which is what I always want. More business, more life. Is choose your life, and then let's build your business and your abundance around that. And you did that. And you took me right up on it, because I told you that, and you're like, okay, Steve, well, here's all what I want. And you're like, yeah, right. Kind of maybe a little bit inside your head, like this one. And then I'm like, okay. And I just went and we built it. And like, I love hearing this story today. It like fills me with such joy, because here you are living the life you want and having all the abundance. You don't have to worry about where a client's coming from. You are living the life that you want, Vitalia. I'm so happy for you.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
It's just, I mean, yeah, I know it's a big, long story, but it's case in point of what you're doing right now. It's so beautiful.
One of the things that you taught me that I think is such a simple lesson, and it's so powerful, which is plan your fun first.
Yes.
So, especially if you're, self-employed and you have a good flow of clients, it's just, you could work for 24 hours a day. There's enough work to fill everything you could possibly do. And if you don't schedule your fun, then that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So when I schedule my fun, it's as serious as, scheduling with a client. So I effectively, it's a meeting. It's a meeting
Yeah.
for me, and I'm
Yeah.
important. And sure, the meeting is clown class, but that's important to
Literally
me.
a clown class.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, exactly. And the other thing that I think works so well is, I have like so many people, a sit down job, right? So when I'm working, I'm sitting down in front of the computer, and that's, not the healthiest way to live. And so it was very important for me, for my fun to be something that's physically active and something that can start to counteract the effects of sitting.
Yes.
So that's such a big part. And then it's nice when there's stress relief and there's joy, there's creativity, there's emotional connection, it's social. So it's
Laughter.
literally, it's laughter. It's pretty much like the best hobby, especially like the most constructive hobby, because it hits so many parts of who I am. And also counteracts some of the difficulties that I might face throughout the day. And then I can take that energy and I can bring it back and feed it back into my business. And what I learn in theater gives me flexibility to handle, some very tough situations at work, and sometimes people are surprised at how I maintain a positive attitude even during hard times, in business situations specifically, because that's where my clients benefit the most. And it's having this totally different practice that is very unlike what most people do when they get off work.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's similar in
Yeah.
that study. The person said when some catastrophe happened in the lab, they were able to brush it off because it wasn't life or death like being on the side of a mountain. So and other scientists would be like throwing everything away and like getting crazy, and they were calm because they're like, this happened. Okay. It's not life or death, but being on the side of the mountain, it's a total different perspective,
Yeah,
but just including that in there, it brings another perspective to your work because you have this other experience rather than you just working all the time. And, I think it's so important that you brought up plan your fun first, because when you're passionate like you are, it's easy to look at just working more. It's like, oh, well, because the business you're doing is not just business. It's not random business, as you already said. It's really conscious business that's making the world better for people on the planet. And so then it's easy to pour more love into it, but we still have to live, because otherwise, you and I both know, because we're both this way, and we're both talking before we actually did the interview, that you could work to your own demise because you want to help. So going back to the plan your fun first, it literally causes you to stop, because otherwise we very well could work hours and hours and hours. So how did that show? Was it easy for you to start doing the plan your fun first, or did you like do it and then it went off and on? Like, was it, or did you run with it for the rest of your life, or how did that work?
Well, I have a range of experiences with it. So I would say that, we did a lot of our work before the pandemic. And so before the pandemic, it was, I wouldn't say it's easy, right? Because you have to choose something you love. You have to show up and give it a chance,
Right.
and if that's something new for you, then that takes definitely time and effort and energy. And if you're not already used to doing that, that's a change. And so,
Like playing the piano, if you've never played piano, because
yeah.
that's a real life one for me. And then you like really stink and you're playing Mary Had a Little Lamb or something, But anyway, but to
Yeah.
that point, it might not be like where you're a pianist like the first day.
Yeah, yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
yeah.
I didn't get there immediately, right?
Right.
But I think I started seeing more value in it. And then, the pandemic happened. And then so everything I had built up all of these things and all these awesome practices. And at the time, just before the pandemic, I was in the theater, 4 nights a week. And, I was in a great place with business and a great place personally. And just when it was really going to take off, it all got shut down in a really big way. And so as a person that's more extroverted, who, does do much better when I have other people around me and can share, in their energy and joy, being cut off from that and then just being filled in this environment of anxiety. And then also having a personality that's sometimes hypervigilant. I'm really detail oriented, and I didn't want to make anyone accidentally sick by getting sick and infecting anyone. That was a really big concern, especially because my husband was working with immunocompromised children. So, the consequences potentially were really large. And so I stopped doing the fun things. And I went a little overboard, in the anxiety and work area, because I thought, oh, well, if I can't go out and I can't do anything, well, I might as well work. And if I'm not working, I'll just volunteer. And if I'm not volunteering, I'll take some online classes. And if I'm not taking online classes, I'll exercise. And so I filled my days with I was like, I'll be the most productive pandemic person ever. And I did that for about a year. I worked 7 days a week, constantly. And then I learned that's a really, really bad idea. It doesn't lead to success. It leads to collapse. And so even though I knew that rest is so important, I didn't give myself that, I think due to the way I was responding to just the anxiety of the world.
Yeah.
And I also felt like I had to keep working, to help my clients because they were scared and I was scared and everyone was having problems.
Yeah.
There was a period of time where every week just some horrible news would come out. And I don't mean like news on the news. I mean like individual personal news to people I knew. My clients, just like really awful things were happening to people. And I didn't have an outlet.
And I
joy.
remember I was one of them because we were working together. And so also for the record, like Vitalia, I work with you, like you help me and I help you. So we've both been each other's clients and we've both helped, been a service provider for each other. And then I too felt the same as you, like, because we're both active in helping people. And so I activated during that period of time and started doing more because I'm like, during that period, everyone needed more help. And then as you already know, and I think most people listening, but if you're listening to this show for the first time with me and Vitalia, then I was paralyzed in 2021. So it took me out, and I want to echo what you're saying. I was definitely hiding depression. I didn't even realize it. It wasn't until like going through it that I realized that I was depressed, because I too am an extrovert, and being around people and then having that stop. I didn't realize how much of an impact it made on my life. And so I remember telling you, and then I know I'm not the only client that went through something crazy. So you had a stack up of that. And I basically I was one of those pieces of news like, hey, I'm not okay. So that it was a wild period, Vitalia. It was so when did you, so it took about a year, and then how did you notice? Did you self-notice or what? How did you know that you went down this?
Yeah, it's hard not to notice when it happens. It's hard not to notice that, I even kind of feel some of those feelings coming back during those times. Just everything becomes really difficult. It was hard not to notice. Sorry, it just makes me emotional just talking about it. I would just cry and then I couldn't stop for really long periods of time. And so I had to get a therapist because I'm just crying all the time. Now I had some really nice clients, people who were really understanding and caring. And I felt supported.
Because they were wow.
Yeah, I felt supported by my clients and I felt supported by the team. But sometimes I would just show up to the meetings and burst into tears. I did my best to show up, right? So I was like, okay, during this time when things were really hard, I tried to live by my calendar. So I went back to, things go on my calendar, and then I show up for my calendar and I do the things. And so my boss is my calendar and I'm going to just do those things, but I didn't have healthy outlets, and I didn't have them for a long time. And I think the ones that I was attempting to have via video, it just wasn't the same. So there's the in-person connection, can't be replaced by video, is what I learned. I also learned that too much video has some serious consequences, on your mind.
Yeah, staring at a screen so many hours.
Yeah. So kind of living this digital world did not bring joy. And because I had overworked to such an extent, again, Because again, it wasn't the first time, but this was, I think, even bigger than the time where I lost partial use of my arms, because this time I lost partial use of my brain, and had a very intellectual job. So my brain, is important. And I realized, because I've been doing some reading about COVID, and I had COVID, like so many people, at one point, and no children were harmed, so it was okay.
Yes, yes, yes.
And I was okay, but it can shrink your brain up to 6% just having it once, and it doesn't even have to be a bad case of it. And so when I realized that I was having trouble remembering things and I was having brain fog, and I was like, ooh, I am not the same person. And it was a big memory thing of like, I lost access to a whole bunch of life experiences that I'd had that suddenly just were gone. And so I decided that, okay, I must be one of the people that must have gotten some of this COVID brain damage. So I'm going to start to work to undo that. So, I did some research of what are the kinds of things that you can do. So, healthy eating, exercise, getting enough sleep, and supplements. My mom directed me to various supplements. And over time, I discovered that there's a whole bunch of adaptogenic mushrooms that are really restorative.
Like lion's mane, many, yes.
Yeah, reishi, lion's mane. And that helped a lot.
It's so huge. It's
that helped a lot.
Big part of my recovery. Big part of my recovery. I'm with you. Yes.
I ended up so now where I am with my mind, I feel like I'm about the same as I was before the pandemic, better in certain cases.
Yes.
For the problem solving parts and, jumping in and being able to, sort out situations quickly, that's improved, but that's just due to the sheer number of hours that I've had to do that. But yeah, so the supplements were a really big part of that. But there was a part that was very scary.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry you went through all that. And it's, it's interesting how this happens, right? Because we knew, like even me, like I even taught you some of these things and I even experienced some of the very similar things. I think in an emergency or in a crisis, we tend to like revert back to old ways of doing things. And then at the same standpoint, we had already grown too. So it was a whole nother set of circumstances. For me, I'm not a regretful person. And, I really look at what did I learn from this? And I know now, like even everything I've been through, I would say that I wouldn't take it back. Like, so even if I had a magic wand and I went back and I could take all of what happened to me away, I wouldn't, because I wouldn't be the man sitting in front of you right now. And so there was a whole nother set of learning that brought me to who I am today. And I guess maybe it's even a louder reminder, because I often say life will tap you, and then it'll slap you. And so I think we're both talking about that, because I literally got slapped and I was literally paralyzed. So I like couldn't work. Like it just completely stopped me. And then I think in a way you were stopped too. There was a point where it's like, okay, I can't go any farther. I just can't. And so then we both had to reinvent ourselves again,
Yeah. And kind of redo that learning that's already been done, go through the steps that we've already gone through, relearning things that maybe we already knew how to do, but forgot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such a part of the life journey, this relearning and remembering that just learning it once is not enough.
What's a case of that? Because we talked about several things that you found very valuable through our relationship, but I'm wondering, like, if you were to pick just for a minute, like I know there's probably more than one, but what's one of the things that you learned with our time together that helped that second wave of relearning? Was there?
I mean, I have to go back to just the same thing that I mentioned, which is, planning your fun first, right? Because what went away in the pandemic is fun, and especially fun with other people.
Okay.
And so, relearning how to like go out, it got really, bad for me because I was trying to be on my very best behavior. So I didn't leave the apartment for 6 months, which in hindsight is a terrible idea. And there was really no reason for it. It wasn't that dangerous, but that's what I did, And so I literally had to relearn like this is how you take the subway. Gee, that's really uncomfortable. And then now it's fine. It's fine. There's nothing wrong with taking the subway. It's awesome. I love public transportation. But at the time I was just like, oh my God, I have to like do a thing.
Yeah.
It's so scary, being able to answer. Again, I was like in bad shape. So, but like answering the question, how are you? That was a really challenging thing because I hadn't had any plans for anything that was fun. So I didn't have positive things to talk about. So once I started very consciously making myself go out and do things that could be fun, whether I enjoyed them or not, that at least gave me something to connect to other people about beyond work, and because I'd been so burnt out at work and things had, been very difficult. Although I have to say, during the worst of times and the biggest difficulties, I put on that animal costume every day. I put it on and I showed up when I could. And I think, I don't know what would have happened if I didn't do that. I don't know. I mean, I actually don't even think that would have been possible because that's just who I am and what I prefer to do. So maybe like still being able to express who I am and connect to my wow clients in a meaningful way, even during the hardest times, helped us both.
Yeah.
And
how fun is that though, when you're getting on a Zoom call and then you're in a different costume every day? I mean,
it is fun. It is fun, except for the days when it's tough, and on the tough days, maybe it's not fun, but it does take the edge off. And if there's going to be like a deep emotional connection, it's nice to be authentic about it. And I know that maybe other people are very different, but for me, part of that authenticity is the animal thing. And people are like, oh, do you just do that for work? And I'm like, no, I'm like this all the time. I'm like this all the time.
Isn't it so cool to be you?
Yeah.
I mean, like seriously.
To actually have people see me for who I am and for me to feel comfortable just, showing up and sharing that with them.
Yeah. You're a performer that does business. You're not a business person that performs. Like the performer comes first, in a creative way. I guess I'm using performer in like a generic kind of way, but I mean, you're just that creative spirit and you're showing up with that creativity, like inventing another character, so to speak. Like you're going to be that animal and bring that livelihood and that fun and that play to that work. And then yet the intellectual side is there. And so you're still able to perform. I often say, like, even the one that you always heard is the chiropractor that I worked with, and it was on-time appointments, but you still have to give pain relief, right? If you're a terrible chiropractor, but you have an on-time appointment, you're not going to care if the appointment's on time. The same thing here. You can show up and be totally entertained. And if the business didn't happen, then it would be a dud.
Yeah.
But but if you can perform as the business person, which you do, and that's why you have all the success. And the beautiful thing, spinning it all the way back, is you get to be you. And I think that's the thing when people come to More Business, More Life, they don't realize, like, this is what I'm here for. I want people to be them. I think we too often in modern times, we're like, oh, my parents say I should be this. And I'm not saying parents are bad. Like, they love you, but they don't know any other way. Like, they think you need to be a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, like those common things in our generation. When you grow up, if you're not one of these things, then you're not going to be successful. You got to go do that. Or then, you go to your community and what do they think of me? And so it's always like, who am I supposed to be from this outside source? And when you really go inward and you're like, wait, what does my heart want to be? And I think that's, in the bigger scheme of things, what we're talking about here, because you were being what you thought you're supposed to be. And then you're like, but I really want to adjust as an animal every day. Right. And then I basically said, yeah, go ahead and do that, because I want to tell you, like, I had to do a whole bunch of work before you met me to even realize that that's possible, because I too was doing the same thing as you and being what everyone else told me to be. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is not why I'm living as a human. I want to be this way. And so I gave myself permission to do that. And then by me doing that and reflecting that on you and many others, you're able to live this life. So I guess let me bring it to a question. Like, how cool is it that you get to be you? You get to be the pure essence of Vitalia and do this good work. It's not an or. It's like you get to do both. What is that like?
Well, I mean, I think that your good work gets amplified, when you are honestly expressing, yourself. And then when you're doing that and you gain acceptance, then it makes it more empowering for you to keep doing it. So for me, if I really drop into that experience, it makes me want to give more.
Yeah.
It makes me want to give more. I think that I have a lot of gratitude. I have a lot of gratitude. You know, I ask myself, like, what does the world want from me? What does the situation want from me? And yeah, just like, how can I be the vessel for creation?
Yeah.
How can I give in
Yeah.
that way from that place? That's how I feel when I'm at my best.
Well, yeah, because your cup
Yeah.
is full. Like, so if you have a cup of water full, you can give water. And if you're not living yourself, then we tend to have an empty cup. And then when we try to give, we have nothing to give. So, or very
Yeah. And I
little.
mean,
Yeah.
and I'd been there too, right?
Yeah.
Like, in the pandemic where I limited myself in my human interactions, and I didn't know that I just need to be around groups of people. It's not enough to be around just one or two people, but for me, it's important to be in groups. And I cut that off, for I guess a lot of good reasons. And that was a part of me that wasn't nurtured. And it really,
Affected you.
impacted me very, very negatively.
Yeah.
And it's been years of recovery from that. But by, being very intentional about how I enjoy myself and how I use that as a way to contribute to the community. So I really like to do both. I love to do like multiple things simultaneously, right? So with the theater stuff, not only is that bringing me joy, but it's bringing people together, and it's bringing them joy as well. And then that brings me even more joy. And it makes me want to do more.
Yeah, and then you show up
And I show up.
in your
Yeah.
full way, and it fills your cup up. And so then you're able to do more. Well,
Up until a point, right?
Yes.
So I run up
In a good way.
against like capacity constraints. So that is like, an ongoing thing of there's not enough hours in the day to do all the things. And so the practice that I'm working on is really my meditation practice. That's, always ongoing. And that's something that you've talked about for years and years is the cornerstone, of wellness and self-care.
Yeah. Mindset.
So
yeah.
that continues to be a really big part of it. And it's really the muscle to be able to drop it, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, great, work is great. And sometimes it's stressful and sometimes it's hard, but sometimes we just need to drop it,
Yeah.
And fun. It's awesome. We want to do it all the time. It would be really great to, have the most fun you ever can. But it's also important to drop it,
Yeah,
and we
stop.
need to be
Yeah.
able to let these things go at the right time,
Yes.
and stay in balance, because there's very real consequences to what happens when you don't drop it. And that's a very,
Yeah.
crude way of saying what meditation describes in much more beautiful words. But it's really just,
Yeah.
letting it go, and sometimes letting it go quickly.
And
picking it back up again.
Yes,
right?
and that's
we
the
don't let
whole-
it go forever,
that's
just for a day or two.
yeah, you got to recharge the battery,
Yeah.
And so the real rest and sleep and all those things and eating right, all those things that you said are so important. And this has been a beautiful exploration of the ups and downs of a life, and then we add more tools every step. So you go, there's peaks and valleys, but each valley comes with more tools to get back up to the peak again. And so your resilience is beautiful, and watching that and just always being willing to learn. I guess I'm curious, in the time that we have left, and maybe there's a few more questions, but I'm just curious, like for people listening, and we're talking about more business and more life, what's one of the things that was like the biggest result for you? Like if you were to pick one, and maybe it's one of the things we already talked about, so maybe it'll be another echo, but what one created the most results, like the most outcome for you, and in what way?
I think, the results really came from knowing how to onboard new clients, and knowing how to gain really effective referrals,
Okay.
and knowing how to have those discussions in a way that closes the deal. And maybe not every time, but whenever there's, that mutual connection. So really finding those mutual connections and then being able to follow through with them. So, as I had mentioned, I don't do any advertising, and my marketing budget is zero. It has been zero for many years, and it's all word of mouth. And so once that, word of mouth referral comes in, just because somebody says something about you to somebody else doesn't mean they're going to hire you.
Yes.
So it's knowing what is the next step. And some of the next steps I was doing before we met, they were not really that effective. And after we met, now the client acquisition process is 30 minutes. It's a 30-minute conversation. And then at the end of that 30 minutes, we decide to work together, or, maybe we decide not to work together. But most of the time, we decide to work together if I end up taking that call. And if my skills, of course, meet, what they're looking for.
Yeah. Because I remember you're the one, and if I remember this, because I know this was many years ago, you told me once, after learning wild clients and learning this onboarding, you had a call with someone and you're like, this is not a fit. And the person was shocked. They're like, you're not going to take my money. And then you said no, because of this and this. And you explained why it wasn't a good fit. And that person, I want to say they referred you 3 other clients, because one, they had instant integrity with you because you wouldn't take their money. And then you also explained what a good fit was for you. And then they started referring. Do you remember that? Like I just remember you were so shocked. You're like, I'm getting referrals from someone I said no to.
Yeah.
But do you remember that?
And it's, it's not about whether you say yes or no, right? It's about the connection. And ultimately, as a service provider, I know what my skills are. I know what my skills are more so than anybody else that I talk to. And so I have a responsibility to that person. If I don't have the right skill set, then, they need to know that, and they need to go and find the right person. So that, referrals can come from anywhere. I am sometimes surprised. I used to have a joke about how I can't leave my house without someone trying to hire me, which was kind of funny, but also a little annoying.
Did that come to the audio logo? Because you would go
the
out?
audio logo. Yeah, because if someone asked me what I did and I described it, and then I also said, then I also do like animal costumes while I'm doing it. And then, people just want to see what that's like.
So the thing you thought was going to make your business not work is actually one of the icings on the cake, so to speak. Like, as they always say, right? Like, there's the cake, but it's the icing on the cake takes it to the whole nother level that now people want to hire. You can't leave your house without people wanting to hire you. Like, how cool is that? Like, how many business owners, founders, entrepreneurs out there that are like possibly listening to this right now and figuring out how much work it is to find clients, and because you're using and it's all technique, it's a skill. And
it's
that's
a
what
skill.
people,
it's a skill.
Yeah.
There's a particular thing. There's particular pieces of information that are provided in a particular kind of way, and then for people where it's a fit, that's really important. So it just so happens that I can work in almost any industry. And I do typically work with, small businesses and startups. And we're, in an environment where there's, quite a bit of entrepreneurship happening around us. And so just knowing that that's happening, and putting yourself into that flow, really, really helps. And I guess, the animal piece makes it memorable.
Yeah.
So I think that's the piece that makes people know to mention me. I think that if I didn't do the animal thing, I don't know that the referrals would come in the same way.
Right, because then there's no differentiation. It's what makes it. There's not many people that do what you do. In fact, I don't know any that do it in the way that you do it. And that you could say that about anyone, even if it's not as dramatic. There's no other Vitalia. There's no other Steve. And this just is a next level, like you fully being you. And then it just works. And yes, you're right. So it's a mixture of all these procedures that are quite simple, but if you know how to do them in the right order, it makes it seamless. And then you being you. And I think it's fun, like, and you're dressing in an animal costume, so it's like super memorable. But I think also it's the authenticity, like, because you're attracting people because they're like, wow, you're just being you.
Yeah, it's because I'm comfortable in an animal costume. If I wore an animal costume and I was like, is this okay? Or, oh, I think I look weird, like that actually is not going to be fun for anybody. So it doesn't actually matter what you wear at all. It's are you comfortable inside of that? Are you in touch with your life essence? Are you able to express gratitude? I think that is the other thing that is such a big part of, learning from you, is you do everything with a lot of gratitude. And gratitude is not only my favorite emotion because it's just very wonderful to experience, but it's a multiplier. If you are successful at something and, you're grateful for your success, and you realize that, there's a lot of things that had to happen in the world for it to be just so, that not all of it is due to our efforts. There's a really big influence as far as family and, many, many factors, so I'm very grateful that, I had a family that really wanted me to excel, in various areas. And they pushed me to that. And maybe I wasn't open to that at times, but but I did it anyway. And so I think I have a lot to be grateful for, to a lot of people. And that's where the wanting to give back comes from. Actually, that's, I think, when I started this whole journey, that was such a big part of that journey, because I felt that even though I was working in these offices, and even though I wasn't really feeling like I was at my best, I was still very grateful for the life that I had. And I still felt like I could do a lot, for others. And so from that gratitude comes the expression. And when the expression comes from gratitude as a gift, it's a just beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And, I wish we didn't have to work for money at all. I wish that it could all be a gift. It's not our current economy, but there have been economies that were gift-based, And, I think that's a really big part of the kind of energy that I try to bring into my work, is it's not really about what is the payment, but it's about how do I come with the intention and the attention to do what's right in the moment, and to give what needs to be given, right? Because it's not necessarily about just what I want to give. It's about what does the other person need. And if I'm, in this place of gratitude, it changes how the help happens, right? So you can do things and you can help people, but they won't feel it unless you have this particular state of feeling grateful for what you have, and being humble, and being attentive to their needs, and, not coming in with your own agenda. So I found that throwing out my agendas was the best, of just showing up and being like, I am here for you. And then you tell me what your agenda is. And then that's what we work on.
Yep. And that's one of the things that I've always taught for so many years: intention and attention. So we set the intention, I'm going to help this person, and then our attention goes on them, which is the opposite of most business. I know, like, you and I are talking about it, and I just want to take a moment to explain it, because for other people listening to it, it could just brush by. But that's the opposite of how business is done in most places. They set intention to make a deal, to make a sale, and then they go in and pitch. So their attention is still on themselves and like what they do. And so it is like an oxymoron. You're literally showing up at a meeting, setting intention to help someone, and then you're putting your attention on them. But then it just works because now that person's feeling held, heard, and you truly can find if you can help them or not. And then this is how you avoid the owl clients. So it actually brings like all of what we talked about into one little sum here, that then you're choosing who to work with because you're putting your attention on them. You can see them for who they are, what they're doing, and can you help? And then you can say yes or no. And then you can keep that wow life and your wow business.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, it's, I like to think of it as, it's like business is an ocean. And we're all little boats. We got our little businesses and we're trekking along in our little boats, but we're not by ourselves. We're in a stream of other boats, and these are our business communities. And so, like, once you know who your clients are and you can meet their needs well, it opens you up to their networks because they're usually really happy to do referrals. And then those referrals are happy to do referrals. And then you actually realize that you all kind of have the same goal. It's not really about who's working for who. It's more like there's this greater thing that we're all doing together, and we're doing it in different ways from different sides, but we're part of an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And that creates just a more compassionate and collaborative way of working together. And it also means that if there's things that are difficult, the pandemic, mental health challenges, just all kinds of life things that can happen. And I'm talking about big life things, life and death things, is really the kinds of things that can happen. But, you're in an ecosystem, and you're together, and maybe you don't see each other all the time. Maybe you're not talking, but just knowing that you're there and you're a part of that. And, you can't get there without being clear on your mission, because I think that's what keeps us together.
And what road you're on, like where are you going and why are you going that way? The why is more important than even how. And that's what you're saying. And that's what I've always said. And you've heard me say so many times, this is together. Like even all these successes we're talking about, it's us together. So even when I'm guiding, I always say, I'm the person with the lights on the tarmac and you're the pilot of your plane. It's not always that way. I've been around other consultants and they'll like take over the plane. And then I'm like, that's to me that
no one likes that.
It doesn't work. And then it's only short-lived, because then when that consultant leaves, then they're like, oh, we don't know how to fly the plane. They always did it. So I'm really like, one, I wanted to be teaching so that you can do this. Because we haven't always worked together. Sometimes it was off and on. Like, you would learn for a period of time with me and then you'd go do it. Then you'd come back, so it doesn't create a dependency for one. But then even in that, there's never, ever a moment through all of our journey together that it wasn't a team approach. Because if I'm telling you something and then it's not done on your end, then we're at a disconnect, And so I love the idea that you're saying the team. And so I guess I have two questions, because we're getting close to the end of our time, Vitalia, but and I know we could talk there's so many things that's happened in our journey together. But if people are listening and they're thinking about more business and more life, because maybe they're listening and they're like, I don't have it the way I want. I'm working without clients. I mean, this happens all the time. So I guess two parts. Like one, what would you say has been the greatest value out of this? And maybe we could start there. And then what would you say to someone that's like, maybe I should do this, or maybe I can do this? Kind of like how you're like, can I be a businesswoman that dresses in animal costumes? So I guess, what would you say over our term of relationships and you coming into more business, more life, what would you say has been the greatest value out of the whole experience?
Well, I mean, I got the thing, so it's hard to say like, oh, the values in this narrow thing, because it's actually very wide. Like, so I wanted a business, I have a business. I wanted to wear animal costumes, I have animal costumes, I wear them all the time. I wanted to perform, as much that, my energy and my time and desire will allow. So I have the performance opportunities. I wanted to take vacations, I take vacations. So it's like the things that I wanted, I got over and over and over again. I also learned that just because you got all of the things, that doesn't mean that you're out of the woods and that's it. And, now you can just luxuriate the whole time is really not how that works. Once you get what you want, there is an element of your responsibility to the world of how you can use that to the, best of your abilities, not really just for yourself, because it's a quick way to, have the thing that we don't want, right? It's the back in the day office experience where people are in it for themselves and then it just, just starts to feel icky. So I feel like as a result of the work that we did together, I got the structure, the confidence, the words, to be able to run a business. And that's huge. That's huge. I mean, I didn't think I could do it or that I would do it, but then fail, I would do it and then lose it, or that I just had so many doubts and, some of them can still come up, but I have concrete evidence, that cannot be refuted that I have in fact done the thing, and I really feel like, some of the training that I've received, for my whole life, I've been training and learning. It's like a really big thing for me that I was able to take that into the kinds of situations that I dreamed about in university. In university, I'm like, I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to work for this kind of company. And usually those dreams don't come true. But I had a chance to do that. I had a chance to work and am still working with an organization that is exactly the kind of organization that I dreamed about in my early 20s. I know I look really young, but I'm older than I look. We'll just say
Yeah.
that. And then I think some parts of it is just beyond what I ever dreamed of was possible. I never thought the world would accept me, you know, in this form, in my animal form, as I
Yeah.
call it,
Yeah.
and it's not because I want to be an animal or I think I'm an animal. It's just I have so much delight in costuming, and animals are very relatable. And there's so many fabulous animal onesies. They're so comfortable and colorful. Like, yeah, I've surpassed what I have imagined. So now the road continues to be new. It's like a new road, which is why I say, how do I feel now? I feel a little bit uncertain around, how things will go. I have a lot of curiosity for what's next. So I'm still in this process of building that is an ongoing experience.
And that's living, right? Because I used to think, I'm going to learn until I die. I don't even know that anymore. Like when I die, I'll probably learn even more. I'll come into this spirit realm, but this is what we're here to do, is to learn and have experiences in this human experience. So I agree with you. I think, Alan Watts said, he was a philosopher in I think like 60s, 70s. When he said that he doesn't like looking at life as a journey, he puts in the perspective as a dance. And he said sometimes it's a slow song, a fast song. It could be a sad song. It could be a happy song. But the point is just keep dancing.
I love that.
Just keep dancing. Yeah, and that's what you're doing. You just
Yeah.
keep dancing, and you get better. You become a better dancer, and you learn new moves, and that's kind of part of your performance. So maybe that's because there's so many metaphors of life, but that one popped in my head for you, Vitalia, because you are a performer, and you bringing that performance into business is just amazing. So thanks so much for sharing all this. I think this may be my last question for today, but so for someone listening and they think, hey, maybe I want help for more business, for more life, and they're on the fence on that, like what would you say to that person?
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing program that helps you really start thinking about what you want to create, why you want to create it, who you're creating it for. And on the basis of that structure, you build your entire business, right? So you want to have the right foundation. And if you build a business on the wrong foundation, that is probably going to fall apart. Or at least if it doesn't fall apart, it could be very painful. So for me, it was able to give me the right foundation. And on the basis of that foundation, that is what I've been doing for the last 10 years. So even when things were tough, that foundation was still there to carry me through the hard times. The hard times end, I come out and I'm like, oh, I'm still here. The business is still here. The clients are still here. Nothing ended, it didn't collapse.
Right.
The foundation is strong. It's a strong foundation.
The systems were there.
The systems were there.
Yeah. For me, going through my paralyzation, I took a near 2-year sabbatical and my business made it.
It's still there. Yeah.
The team ran it. And I mean, so I understand. And even for me, I'm the one that taught you a lot of these things. I'm not saying I taught you everything, because you brought a lot to the table even when we met, and you have a lot of talent, so I tell you. But some of these structures are very deliberate that I taught you, and I use them myself. And even it's funny for me to say that out loud, because there is a little bit of surprise, because I never thought if I just completely vanished for 2 years that my company would survive, but it did. And it goes back to, so even me, I was looking back going, wow, I did it. But these things work, to your point. It's just,
and they're not complicated. They're not so technical that you can't grasp them.
Yeah.
Right. In fact, I think sometimes they're simple, so we miss them completely. And we think, oh no, that can't possibly be, that critical. And then it turns out, oh, actually, no, that really matters. Do you have a strong connection, with the people that you're working with? It matters a lot.
Yes.
Whether they think you're awesome or not.
Yes.
It matters a lot.
The easy things, sometimes we think in business it has to be complex or it's not valued. The more complex it is, the more value. And there can be truth to that. But it doesn't mean everything in business needs to be complex to be successful. In fact, some of the most simple things that we overlook, to your point, are what makes business a nightmare. So we just include those as we're talking, and it makes all the difference. It's beautiful to go on this journey with you, Vitalia, like just now. And I love reflecting over the years that we've known each other so long, and to see the ups and downs, and to see the throughput that the business just kept going in the happiest times and the toughest times. But what brings me the most joy is that you're being you. You're fully being you. And I'll never forget the day that you asked me if it was a good idea to dress up as animals, and to see you now with the confidence and that concrete evidence, as you use those words, that happened. So I'm just appreciating you right now, sharing this story, because not everyone is taking that choice. So I guess with that, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
You're welcome, Steve. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. And thanks for watching and tuning. If you're watching this or you're listening to it, however you're digesting this podcast, I so appreciate you showing up. And this is why we have More Business, More Life podcast, because we want to share these stories like Vitalia's, so that we can inspire you to live the best life that you can. And if you're on our newsletter and you're getting this podcast, reply. Tell us what was the most valuable part of this episode, because guess what? We actually read it and we will reply to you. Yes, we do. So if you're not on the newsletter, then really simply, you can text WOW, W-O-W, to 72,000. So that's 72000 72000, and text WOW. It'll prompt you to join our newsletter. And then you too can correspond with us. Let us know what was valuable. Let us know what you want to hear about. We are here to serve and bring more business and more life to your life. And as Vitalia also brought up today, is the gratitude. I always say, until our next episode, remember, choose gratitude and create freedom. We'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for listening to the More Business, More Life podcast. I hope you got value. And if you did, we have so many more things for you at stevenapolitan.com. You'll be able to connect with us on social media. We are active. You can ask us questions. I look forward to having you on the next show. Until then, remember, choose gratitude and create freedom.